what is the DINK movement and why is it growing in popularity? So if you're a lot like me, you probably are asking, January, what is the DINK movement? So let's first define what this DINK trend is that's surfacing kind of as a new trend for a lot of couples that are married but don't want to have children. So DINK actually stands for dual income, no kids, DINK. So let's talk about why there is a growing rise of couples who don't want to have children. Now, very important for us women to hold a standard of respect because we don't want to impose our choice on people. Like, I think it's a very important, respectful way to make sure that amidst us sharing our opinions, which I'm going to share my opinion on the why, we don't fall into the trap of shaming people for the choices that they're making. And I think we can either be part of the solution or part of the problem, which is we're complaining about what's happening, what should be happening, and it then becomes a war of complaints. So what I want to enter the conversation here is why? Why is there a growing trend of this DINK movement where couples are choosing not to have children? Okay. Not so that what we want to do is get to the source of the why, not because we're trying to convince couples of changing their mind and saying, oh, you should have kids, because I was looking at the articles and they were shamed for being selfish. And I don't think that's necessarily the right strategy, as it is, what can we do? How can we reflect on how we are living our motherhood, our relationships, our family life that maybe is contributing to people not wanting to have children? So let's talk about this. Okay, so number one, what is the purpose of actually a marriage? And, besides the fact that we can talk about that it, brings you to heaven if you're a man or woman of faith, that's what the purpose is, right? Is that you go into here, raise a family, go forth and multiply, and hopefully get to heaven. Now, I'm not imposing my faith upon you from a very, I would say, moral understanding, apart from those that have deeply rooted belief in their faith. What is the purpose of being married? Let's just start there. So if the purpose of being married is just to have fun and enjoy and be with each other, does that fulfill us? Right? Does that fulfill us? We're just going into doing all the fun things and traveling together and having a whole heck of a lot of fun. Does that satisfy the human heart? And the answer is, for a time being, it could, right? Just as material things can satisfy you to a point, but then there comes a point where you feel like it's just material things. I'm not really fulfilled. And we know that to be true because we have a lot of people who have a lot of, I would say, financial means, but they're not really happy with their life. So what makes people happy? That begs the question, what makes people happy? Well, what makes people happy is progress, not just to go into forever vacation and have a life free of pain and all pleasure. That could get really quickly unfulfilling. And you probably can see evidence of that in our culture, of people who have so much and are constantly partying and living a life of pleasure, but they're not really fulfilled. Not that that's not important. I think it's important to leisure. It's important that we celebrate the beauty of life, but it's not the sole purpose of life. Now, it goes back to, how are we then creating a relationship? What is then our purpose as a couple? If what fulfills us is actually to grow, and we have evidence after evidence that growth is actually what fulfills the human heart. It's what makes us happy, is to ascend to our higher self. This is why we have all this, personal development and becoming the best version of yourself, because the journey to becoming is in itself actually fulfilling, because we are made for growth. The moment we feel stuck, unmotivated, the same person year after year, I would say, is the same moment we feel like, I feel anxious and stressed because I'm the same person year after year. So let's go back to now, what's the purpose of couples? Well, the purpose of being together with a couple is to actually grow together, not just have fun together, not just pleasure together, but to grow together. To grow to what? To becoming greater than our current self. So if we're together in a relationship and we're not growing, we're dying. Just as like we're not growing as a woman, we're dying. And if we're pleasuring after pleasuring after pleasuring, but we're not actually growing, becoming a better person, a better woman, we call it in the women's school a whole version of yourself, which means every part of you feels fully alive, then we're in dying. So couples that are not growing are dying. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves is that, what's the best way to grow? Well, the best way to grow is to be intentional about our own growth, is to ascend to our higher self by studying and growing and aspiring and chasing a dream that's bigger than ourselves, because that requires us to sacrifice. That means that we learn something new every day, that we discipline ourselves, that we're growing towards something that we were never before, whether that's a more disciplined woman, that's a more kinder woman, that's a more, I would say, business savvy one, whatever it is, you're ascending to your higher self. And that in itself actually fulfills you. I know that to be true for me. You know, I started my passion for training women 25 years ago. And I find that the biggest reward for me is not achieving the dream of building a school for women, but rather the greatest reward is who I'm becoming along the journey of fulfilling God's dream in my heart. The dream is actually the journey. And Kobe Bryant has his most famous quotes is, you know, when you're waking up in the morning and it's hard and you're picking yourself back up and you feel like a failure and you're getting up again and again and there's no reward, that's actually the dream. So what am I saying? For couples to grow together and training together and disciplining together, that's living that dream, because you're not the same couple growing together over and over again. So if couples right now are not intentionally growing, then it's only a matter of time until they're dying. And if it's all about pleasure and having fun, then essentially it's kind of going to get boring. Now, I'm not saying that children is the answer to growth, but what I am saying is that children helps you grow if you choose to. What am I saying? If you choose to, you could be also a mom and a dad who's choosing not to grow. And what will happen is that motherhood then and being a mother and a father becomes really hard. So now goes back to the question, why are couples choosing this DINK trend of dual income, no kids? Maybe, number one, we're not making our marriages attractive. Maybe couples are looking, young people are looking at marriages and say, why should I get married? It's too hard. It's exhausting. You lose yourself and you never have time for yourself. What is our responsibility in making our relationship so beautiful and inspiring that it inspires people to actually want to be married? That's number one, which then goes back to, are we growing as a couple so that we are ascending to a higher version of ourselves, which then allows us to grow, which makes us fulfilled, which makes us inspiring to those around us? Because if you're not growing as a couple, you are dying. There's no lukewarm road here. So are we making our married life so attractive? Now, if you have a beautiful marriage out there and you are blessed with one, share it. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Don't brag about it, but make it an opportunity to inspire those around you of what it means to love and be loved so fully, so freely, that it inspires people to the authentic form of the way God intended love to be. That's number one. Number two, are we making motherhood completely repelling to those around us? We can't control what people choose. What we can control is how we live our life so beautifully, so profoundly, that it makes motherhood so attractive. Now, there's also a growing trend of a hot mess mama. Hot mess mama means that I am celebrating the fact that my life is so hard and is such a hot mess, and motherhood is so hard. My kids are the reason why my life is hard. I never get enough sleep. I can never go out. My dreams are gone. And what we are basically saying to the world is motherhood is not worth it. you lose yourself along the way. Is there a role that we play to make motherhood look so attractive and so beautiful that it inspires people to want to become mothers and not ditch children, which ultimately could be a greater path for them becoming more fulfilled? Not necessarily imposing that. I'm just saying children help you become a greater version of yourself if you choose to. But if you don't, it could be the very reason why people don't actually also want to get married, because it's repelling to them to live motherhood in a way where you lose who you are. And who wants to lose who they are? Begs the question is, how am I, January Donovan, living, my own marriage, being a mom of 8, while also building a business in a way that breathes life in people and not give myself excuses for lack of discipline, lack of training, lack of study, lack of awareness of my role as a mother to actually elevate culture and invite people to the beauty of motherhood, the sacredness of motherhood. I think the trend of hot mess mama, whether it's a fault of our own, is indirectly telling people, don't do it. You should be afraid of it. It's horrible. You lose yourself. You can never have sleep. And I think it goes back to, we've weakened the woman so much that the very thing that actually makes her so beautiful, which is motherhood, our womb, the very beauty of nurturing and caring for a child, we are now repelled by it instead of celebrating it. We've weakened the woman in a way that she is incapable of managing her mind and incapable of disciplining herself to layers and layers of sacrifice, that the dishes become way too hard, that taking care of the children becomes way too hard. And it's not that it isn't challenging. It's just that we don't become a victim to the challenge. Rather, we have enough strength to know this is challenging, but I can muster up the courage. I can do challenging things. That when my children are crying, I'm the pillar. I'm not crying with my child. That I can train myself to clean the kitchen fast, do the dishes fast, the laundry fast, and train my skill level so that I'm not consumed by laundry all day and my dishes all day. That I'm also disciplined enough to know I'm not spending all this time in social media making myself feel bad because I haven't it all figured out perfectly, and then going around and look at my kitchen. How are we advertising motherhood to the little ears that are listening to us and watching us? Are we looking at them and saying, I love being a mom. I'm training as a mom. I am living a life of excellence as a mom, that I am making the ordinary extraordinary, that I love creating a home for you that's orderly and that's sacred. I love pursuing my dreams as a mother. Have we abandoned the life of excellence in motherhood, where we are constantly making the ordinary extraordinary through a life of discipline, that we are advertising motherhood as a place of beauty, of strength, of courage, of hope, of vision? Or are we living our motherhood in a way that's repelling people to actually want to become mothers? We can't shame people to not want to be mothers if our motherhood is also repelling. Because if we're falsely advertising the gift of motherhood to be a place of constant complaining, then maybe that's the reason why people don't want to be mothers. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't suffer. I think precisely a woman's ability to suffer in grace day in and day out, where she makes her life an act of contribution. She suffers knowing there is a purpose behind her suffering, that her children can grow up to become wholesome adults that are going to lead the charge in rebuilding culture. That if she stays up late, she's not, advertising it to the world, or she's not complaining about her children being a hot mess, or speaking ill about her husband, or speaking ill about the fact that it's a constant growing stress and anxiety to be a mom. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there needs to be permission to process our pain. I think we need to do it in a way that also doesn't disregard the sacredness and the beauty of motherhood, that there's a safe place to do that, but be mindful that everybody is also listening to how we advertise motherhood and how we live it in a way that's attractive. I think we need more women that are going to boldly live motherhood with elegance, with strength, with genuineness, with sincerity, with discipline, with responsibility, with courage. a life of excellence. Athletes and Olympians train day in and day out to win the gold medal. Mothers, this is the Olympics of our lifetime. The Olympics of our lifetime is to raise children that are going to lead the charge in rebuilding culture. That requires our deep training. So we can't shame people for not wanting to be married if our married life lacks growth, or we're not growing as a mother, or we have assumed that motherhood is the death of dreams rather than the expansion of it. The invitation that I tell women is we have to train. We have to take responsibility for our own growth, because if we lack the skills to manage our mind, manage our emotion, manage our home, manage our, I would say, our family life, it is going to be hard. It's like trying to become an Olympic gymnast, but you don't know how to tumble, you don't know how to turn, you don't know how to focus. You can dream about being an Olympic gymnast all day long, but if you lack the training to do the very basic foundational skill set that would create a beautiful routine that would allow you to dance and do those routines, then it's just a pipe dream. But maybe it's time for us to bring reverence back to motherhood, beginning with our own ability to live the ordinary moments in a very extraordinary way. The second thing is, the third thing, so it's couples, our motherhood, and I think the sacredness of family life. When we look at the way family life is sometimes advertised, it's chaos, it's madness, it's crazy. And I think that, children, for me, it's loud, but it doesn't have to be chaotic. I think that we can create an environment for our children that is ordered towards peace and joy, that gives them a place of both freedom, but also responsibility. And I think that takes a lot of interior discipline for a mother and a father to come together and say, how do we honor the sacredness of childhood, honor the family life, and make it an inspiring hope for those around who maybe have given up on the beauty of children. Now, in my opinion, to me, I love being a mom. Like, the hardest part of my job in the women's school is not the hard work that comes with it, but rather having to leave my children when I have to do long hours of training, or I have to write a book, or I have to do, travel, because I just love being with my children, and I love forming my children. I love training my children. And I think that we have to love being with our children and not feel like we need a break from our children. Now, loving our children means that we are receiving nourishment in every part of our life so that we don't actually resent our children. That requires boundaries. That requires knowing what to ask help. That requires knowing what we need, awareness of who we are. This idea of self-love needs to come from self-knowledge, so that we as mothers can love ourselves in a way that honors our value, fills our cup, so we can give more of ourselves to our family life. We have to be custodians of our family life. We need to be custodians of the language that our family is using, of how we are advertising or falsely advertising the beauty and sacredness of family life. We can't just evangelize people to say, well, we need to honor family life, and we need to make sure that we honor the beauty of marriage, if our own life does not actually exude that beauty of both marriage and family and of children. Now, does it require a lot of humility? Absolutely. Why? Because you do it so imperfectly as a woman. You don't have all the answers. There's no training on motherhood prior to motherhood. There's no training in how to be a wife prior to being a wife. There's no training in how to actually honor the sacredness of your own home, design a home that makes you feel fully alive. And women feel shame and guilt. I do. I fall every single day, but the alternative is to not do anything about it. The alternative is to blame other people for the choices they're not making, when maybe our life could be what's hindering people from wanting to be married, because we're not training ourselves to layers and layers of skill set that would help them, that would help us live our life fully alive in every arena of our life. So here's a take-home point with, why people are not, why the DINK movement is growing, is the problem with darkness is not darkness, it's lack of light. Our lives need to be full of light, fully alive. That becomes the inspiration of other people seeing, oh, wow, I love the idea of being married. I love the children. I love the home life. It's so inspiring. I want that. Like, you can have a lot of kids and be so peaceful and calm and beautiful and inspiring and have a beautiful relationship after, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. That's what we want. But that requires a woman that's constantly growing. That requires a man that's investing in their own growth. That requires a couple that's growing so much so that they can feel fully alive. Therefore, they can breathe life in those around them. And that's what inspire means, to inspire. Inspire means to breathe life. So we're not here to shame people, rather to make our life an invitation towards what is true, good, and beautiful, beautiful in our marriage, beautiful motherhood, and beautiful family life. And that is the best way for us to evangelize people in the sacredness of having a family, in the sacredness of marriage and family life. No shaming. Let's take up our own responsibility on promoting what is true, good, and beautiful.